Okay, welcome to this short video which is about designing surveys. So this is a small section of chapter 5 within the Scott McKenzie book, and I just want to give you an idea of maybe just some examples of how I've run surveys in the past, just to give you a sense of kind of their use in practice as we go forward. So what do we use surveys for? We use them for gathering demographics, and we use them for gathering opinions or understanding behaviours. So when we use them for demographics, this is something that will apply regardless of whether or not you've got a study that is a survey. If you are doing like a more quantitative thing, so you're doing a lab study and you're trying out a new system, you would still have demographics because your system is only applicable to the demographic that you've studied. So you're going to use demographic surveys to gather that information and put your results into context. If you have a study that is a survey, you'll then continue after your demographics and ask the remaining questions. So if you look at gathering demographics, demographics is a mixture of open, closed, and combination fields. So open fields are things like age, height, weight, like pure racial data that you can then use to perform some statistical analyses on. But that you can also have things like your standard deviation, your range of values, that sort of stuff, to just describe who your participants were. More often I see gender included within that, just because that gives people the freedom to write whatever they want in that box. There's closed fields, which are things that have commonly used limits. If that is something, typically that's things where you can be one but not the other. So nominal. So if ask what my current university is, that would be something that I can really only have one of them, or my primary university, or my top attended, whatever. Sometimes what you might see is like age ranges. So 18 to 24, 25 to 30, that sort of thing. I would caution against using them. Purely because it limits your analysis value. You can put people into brackets afterwards to do your analysis, if that makes sense, but why would you limit the value of the data you're getting in by, bracketing it off so early? In cases where you already very clearly know what you want to find out, and you're using, I want to find out about the behaviours of people who pay different levels of tax, and that's my hypothesis, then dividing people by salary so that you can infer tax bracket makes sense. You might often find closed fields used as inclusion and exclusion criteria. So if I'm interested in the behaviour of software developers, are you a software developer? Yes or no. If you tick yes, you continue with the rest of the survey, you're included. If your answer is no, then you're not the person I'm looking for, so you're redirected to a thank you for taking part debrief screen, and you're done. So that is a useful thing because it kind of removes this burden on participants when they're not actually the people that you're looking to include. You're only going to exclude their entire survey afterwards, so exclude them from the beginning. Combination fields are kind of almost the best of both worlds, but slightly harder to analyse. So it gives you a specific thing. So this was a survey I did that was looking at design practices of people with UX or user experience design backgrounds versus computing backgrounds. And I looked at both professionals and students, and I was interested in that. But I also had this other box so that if someone could tell me, I'm a banker, but I'm really interested in fintech, and so I want to know more about interaction and design from that point of view, then they could put in there that they're a banker, and it would give me some indication that they're not within my target groups, but they may have a relevant contribution. Okay, so that is gathering demographics. Every study should have some kind of demographics component, just for that context gathering situation. Okay, if we're then understanding behaviour, we want to gather information on how people use technologies or tools or services, and sometimes we want to know why they do things in the way that they do. So if we're gathering information on how people use them, I might ask questions like, what is your practice? What's your protocol? outline how you would achieve X. And that would be people. So, for example, we've got a survey recently where we were looking at design practices for designers in terms of whether or not they had any kind of education in design methods. And how do you use these things and where did you get that knowledge from and that sort of stuff. So that's all very qualitative and everyone could write something different, but it's all about how they use those tools in their own practice. Now we can gather some information about that quantitatively. I can put a tracker on the computer and track which apps they use and how long they use them for and that sort of thing. But what I'm missing is I'm missing why they do it that way. If I know that a designer uses Photoshop for 4 hours a day, I might have some sense of, write some tool that can tell me, well, they were changing colour this amount of times, they were looking at fonts this amount of times, but I don't know why. What's their rationale for doing that? And there's reasons that I might want to know that. So I might want to know it for marketing. So which are the things that people are most valuing? I can market, I can design features around them, and I can get a financial commitment from my users around the most valuable features. So there's a reason why when you have tiered price structuring, the thing that people use most is never in the bottom tier. Like I've been looking at Miro recently, which is a tool that's like a virtual whiteboard, and they sold this massive thing. Oh, we can now get video calling. Everyone was like, yes, brilliant. I've been looking for video calling. It's now all in one system. And then I get there and it's like, oh, well, you need to pay the enterprise plus price or whatever. So that they've built that desire for the thing, but then they're asking for that financial commitment. And that's why they know people will commit to it, because they know that that's the feature that people want through surveying people. So I want to know how people use things. I want to know why people use them. And when I have both those things, I get this insight into the challenges that they face. And because I know what challenges people have, what workarounds they have, how they make sense, what is their kind of cognitive structure to make sense of my software, I can then design those new features. Because once I know the challenges, simple things like I might say I'm a bank and I ask people, hey, what's the top 3 things that you wish the app had? Or what's the top 3 most difficult things that an app had? And I find out that the standing order setup, nobody sets up standing orders. Or what you often find is people use the system, but they have this offline support. So like with me and screen readers, so I have this bit of paper where I've written all the information about the screen reader to help me make sense of it. People might have that for all sorts of things, and until you ask them about those challenges and how they behave in completing that task, you don't get a sense of what they are. So all of this is kind of leading towards, I understand their behaviour, I know why they do it that way, I know what challenges they face, and therefore that's my prime opportunity right here to develop new technology and tools and services that will give me that financial reward or some other motivation, whatever that is. So you can either get that information through a standardised or a custom survey. This is an example of a standardised survey. So the NASA Task Load Index is a subjective workload assessment tool, and it's a very wordy way of saying that we are evaluating how easy or difficult a person thinks a task was. So it's subjective, it's from the point of view of the person completing the survey. So it's a 6 question survey, so it's super quick. So you can do it if, let's say, you've got like 3 options or 3 systems. I can get people to use all 3 and complete the TLX without adding very much kind of participant time or effort into my study. So we ask questions like, how mentally demanding was the task? How physically demanding was it? How much time did it take? Did you actually complete what you wanted to complete? How much effort did you have to put in to do that? And how frustrated were you? So that's a summary of the questions. Originally, this was a 21-point scale, but studies have shown that it's equally as effective as a 7-point scale. So that screenshot there is from the paper version. So originally it was a pen and paper task. Now you can access that you can create this survey just using Google Forms and a 7-point Likert scale, which makes it easier for people to complete and easier for the analysis, obviously, because it's then all in a spreadsheet. So why make your life and the participant's life more difficult? Just put it in a 7-point scale. There's no difference. And there's a link there to go and see it, the TLX. It's a really, really good measure of how usable, not necessarily how usable a system is, but how much effort someone has to put in. And very often you can see things like, I had to put in loads of effort, but I got what I wanted at the end. So you're like, okay, participants are persistent, like they're really going for it. But if someone says, I achieved what I wanted, but also my temporal demand was really high, that's probably not sustainable, right? So you can start to kind of tease out the differences between all of these components. A custom survey is when you just write the questions. So the key thing to emphasize here is that you trial them and you make sure that you kind of have people answering the questions in a sensible way or how you accept. So we did this recently for a study on emoji accessibility. So we wanted to know, how do visually impaired people use emoji, or how do they not, and why do they do it that way? So we had a series of questions which kind of asked them to step through their process for how they did those things, which was really good. And the value actually of doing that in a survey is that they can send us the emoji. So I don't know what this emoji actually is, and they can include it. And so that gave us some really, really rich data to go on and do interviews with those participants. So there's a link there if you're interested in emoji accessibility. So that's understanding how, so I can understand how people do it, but I might want to gather people's opinions or thoughts on technologies that they've been exposed to. So the classic example is, I have a lab study, I show someone something new and I want to know what they think about that. That might be, it's a new software system, or it might be, it's a new way of doing it. So now I'm going to do it in virtual reality. Is virtual reality any good or not? Tell us what you think. So these are typically open-ended questions or ranking questions. So an open-ended question is basically outline why you think this. So this is an example of a VR music generation tool. So you can just see there, that's the VR controller that someone's holding, and they're picking up this box and they can move it around, and each box makes different sounds. And so outline why you think this is sensible. And again, you get a long answer. Now, this is a Google problem. It's that, see where that says your answer? It's actually a text area. It's actually like a paragraph response, but it kind of looks like I just want one line. And so, yeah, Google surveys is good if you want the basic information, but as soon as you want something a bit more complex, it's probably not. Dundee has access to survey tools that are better than Google and are GDPR compliant and all this sort of stuff. So although I'm showing you some Google information, these are studies that have originated either before GDPR or they originated outside of Europe. So there's a little bit more freedom in terms of where that data is going. I might want people to rank stuff. So this is really common when you're asking people's opinion. So if you show them multiple options and ask them to put them into order, but remember, ranking things does not mean that there's an equal distance between them. So if I take this example here, where I'm asking people to rank workplace attributes, I might really, really care about benefits, and I've put that as my number 1, but there's not really that much difference between pay at 2 and job security at 5. So I've got this nice highlight, this is my important bit, and then I've got this cluster of other things. So kind of being aware that this doesn't mean an equal distribution of things, it's just the ordering. But it is useful in terms of identifying the things that most people place importance on. Over a large group of people, these kind of things will average out, but you can't then, you can perform some descriptive statistics, and I can say, well, this was the most popular and this percentage of people picked this as number 1, But what I can't do is then compare how many people picked 1 and 5, because that's not necessarily an equal distance between them for all participants. So that is something to think about for that one. So yeah, no direct comparisons between positions. So the key thing here is that you pilot stuff. It doesn't matter whether it's a simple demographic survey or whether it is something more complex, it's a study in itself. You should always pilot stuff. And that is a case of getting it in the correct system that you're going to use. So you're actually piloting the survey software, not just the questions. Are there questions that are just difficult to use in the survey software? I've seen some really horrific implementations of ranking questions and ordering questions. It might also be that you want to assess that it actually is displaying properly on people's devices, especially if you've got things like video, pictures. Can people use them in various bandwidths? Simply that sort of thing. And yeah, so I have my own example of this. Is last year I had a survey and I did a pilot, and I didn't do a pilot with the select group that represented my participants. I did a pilot with some other people in the lab, and that was an error on my part because I was gathering information on student behaviours when they left university and became a professional, and I was looking at how advanced are they in terms of their types of design thinking and how do they apply that in their work. And I asked, one of the ones was, in what year did you graduate? Expecting I might get 2018, 2012, 2019. And I got so many people that responded with 4th year because they finished their study, they graduated after 4th year. And nobody in my pilot group picked that, but none of them had recently been a student. I'm thinking in terms of 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th year. So yeah, that was a nice lesson for me. So I missed out. We first noticed this after and my mailing list for this survey was about 100 people maybe. And after about 15, 20 of them had completed the survey, we found this problem. We got around it by adding EG 2019, since that was the year that I was running the study, EG 2019. But there was about maybe 8 to 10 people that we had to discount because we didn't know what year they'd graduated. So piloting is super important for all studies, not just surveys, but obviously for surveys, yes, you want to pilot and make sure that you're getting correct and manageable responses and responses that are relevant. Okay, so that is a quick kind of summary on designing surveys. It's a small component in the book, but I think in terms of particularly the demographic stuff, it's a bit more important going forward. So designing surveys is done.